Hey, I'm Ashley Jackson, and this is Push the Next Generation, your Gen Z-coded guide to power and politics. Today we're decoding reproductive freedom. So I realize I should have walked you all through this sooner, but the Push the Next Generation news highlight segment is meant for the girlies and everyone else who may have turned off their daily news notifications, those who only get their news online instead of legacy media, those who want someone else to do the fact-checking for them, and even those who may just want the Spark Notes version of what's happening in the world. I'm just trying to make sure that you all sound like you're in the know on that first date. I got you. So let's get into some news updates and then we'll start our interview. I'm going to start with some of what's going on in the U.S. government. Representative Sarah McBride, the first openly transgender member of Congress, is facing backlash from Republican colleagues regarding her use of bathrooms in the Capitol. Legislation introduced by Representative Nancy Mace seeks to restrict bathroom access based on biological sex, claiming that McBride's presence threatens the safety and dignity of female members. In turn, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, criticized Mace's actions as cynical and transphobic, arguing that they endanger all women and girls. Speaking of the endangerment of women and girls, in response to calls for transparency regarding former Representative Matt Gaetz' alleged sexual misconduct, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stated that she plans to release information about other lawmakers' sex crime cases if the House Ethics Committee proceeds with its report on Gaetz. This threat has escalated tensions within the Republican Party. And in a move that shocked many, Gaetz stepped back from consideration for the Attorney General position. He basically said that his ongoing allegations of sexual misconduct and drug use would be distracting from President-elect Donald Trump's agenda. Let us not forget that he's also been convicted for sex crimes too. But I digress. Trump has now nominated Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, in Gaetz' place. Other fascinating news on the nominations of it all, Trump has nominated co-founder of World Wrestling Entertainment, also known as WWE, and former administrator for the Small Business Administration, Linda McMahon, to be Education Secretary. McMahon's lack of traditional education experience has drawn criticism from some education advocates. I've personally seen many teachers on social media this week engaging in the trend of preparing for their next school years under her leadership by training for wrestling in their classrooms. And one of last week's noms, Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host, is under heat for his multiple allegations of sexual misconduct through his career. But frankly, this seems to be a consistent thread with this incoming administration. So we'll just see how that goes. Now for non-US news, because we have to be well-rounded, folks. Russia has escalated its military actions against Ukraine, conducting significant missile strikes on Ukraine's power grid. President Vladimir Putin has issued warnings to the West following these developments. More on that front, President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use long-range missiles against Russian targets for the first time, marking a significant shift in the United States military support for Ukraine. The International Criminal Court has also issued arrest warrants for leaders from both Israel and Hamas amid ongoing tensions in Gaza, highlighting the complex geopolitical situation in the Middle East. President Biden responded that the implication of equivalency between Israel and Hamas is outrageous. A tragic stabbing incident at a vocational school in China resulted in 8 fatalities and 17 injuries, raising serious concerns about campus safety and security measures in the country. And close to home, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is proposing a goods and service tax, GST, holiday to help alleviate financial burdens for Canadians during the holiday season. This initiative aims to garner public support and address rising costs for families. In Canada, post workers are also currently on strike, causing significant disruptions in mail services, including approximately 85,000 passports stuck in transit. Meanwhile, Vancouver is buzzing with excitement as it hosts its Grey Cup final for the first time in a decade. The event is expected to draw large crowds and significant media attention, showcasing Canadian football culture. And finally, Kendrick Lamar just released a surprise album, Billy Ray Cyrus called out the Country Music Awards Beyoncé snub, and there has been a mass exodus from X, formerly known as Twitter, post the U.S. presidential election. Approximately 115,000 users deactivated their accounts shortly after Election Day. High-profile figures, including celebrities and journalists, have publicly announced their departures due to increasing political polarization and dissatisfaction with the changes implemented by Elon Musk. And where are they all going, you might ask? Well, platforms like Blue Sky have seen explosive growth, gaining over 1 million new users in a single day and reaching over 20 million total users. And Meta's Threads is also gaining traction as an alternative platform. Oh yeah, and Elon, our soon-to-be co-lead of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is now making humanoid robots. How fun. Now that we're all caught up, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Push the Next Generation, recommend it to a friend, follow on socials at Push the Next Generation Pod, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Okay, now that the begging is over, let's get into it. This week, I'll be speaking with Alexis McGill Johnson. She is president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Action Fund, a national reproductive health and rights advocacy organization that fights to ensure that vital health services are provided to 2.1 million people each year at nearly 600 Planned Parenthood health centers across the country. She is also the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, a national nonprofit organization that is the country's most trusted name in sexual and reproductive health and rights. Since joining Planned Parenthood as a board member over a decade ago, Alexis has expanded Planned Parenthood Action Fund's advocacy power and led the organization through challenges, from its exclusion from Title X to the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. A thought leader on reproductive freedom, racial justice, and implicit bias, she is a frequent commentator in the press and keynote speaker, a founder of the Culture Group, and currently serves on the boards of Color of Change as well as Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights. Disclaimer, this interview was recorded before the U.S. presidential election, but our mentions of the election still felt evergreen, even in the context of this new political climate. Welcome, Alexis McGill Johnson. We have the wonderful Alexis McGill Johnson today on Push the Next Generation, and we're going to get into all of the things. So let's start with just a brief overview of Planned Parenthood. I mean, I think it's a term actually that we hear a lot in society, but I don't know if many people know exactly what the org does. So if you could just give us an overview.
Of course. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest sexual and reproductive health care provider. We have 49 affiliates, over 600 health centers where we provide access to birth control, to STI testing, to breast cancer screenings, to gender-affirming care, to abortion where we can. Planned Parenthood is part of a community. It's part of the public infrastructure, serving folks who are in need of sexual and reproductive health care and sometimes other behavioral health and mental health care, and just been part of a community for over 100 years.
That's just so amazing. I think we in society can kind of have a myopic view on things like this, and to know that your org does so much more than what I think people understand, I think is just really beautiful. And I'm grateful for Planned Parenthood's work. But I'd love to know from you, what are the main challenges and opportunities you face in leading Planned Parenthood? Because I can imagine it's a big job.
It is a big job. So, as you know, I'm the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, which is the healthcare side, the healthcare education research side. I'm also the president of and CEO of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, because healthcare is politicized. So we have to have a structure to funnel our supporters in to defend the very care that we provide. So I would say that the challenges are political, right? The challenges are the fact that since the Dobbs decision, we now have 20 states where almost half of all women and half of all Black women no longer have access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortion, in those states. And the impact is devastating, right? In our communities, where the maternal mortality rate on average is 3 to 4 times greater than white women. We also know that our STI rates are significant and so forth. And so, I think the challenges are, politically being in a space where there are so many politicians who are trying to take away access to basic healthcare, who are fighting organizations like Planned Parenthood because we dare to care for people who have the least access to care, and they sit at the margins of our, communities and societies. And so really trying to lead an organization kind of up a hill, right? Given what that environment looks like, probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think to your point about politicians, I'd love to know, in terms of the 2024 election, why you believe that it's significant, but also kind of with acknowledging that it is significant, how Planned Parenthood actually gets funding. If you can walk people through how that all works, I think it will also explain why this election is even more significant than most.
Yes, absolutely. So again, our Planned Parenthood affiliates provide the healthcare. Just like any other kind of healthcare business, they are ones who see patients and then they seek reimbursement from private insurance, from people who are able to pay out of pocket, and from public insurance like Medicaid. And the importance of kind of Planned Parenthood being able to both provide that care and get reimbursed for the care that they provide is really a question of who is in government at any particular time. So when Donald Trump was last president, he instituted something called a gag rule for organizations like Planned Parenthood that limited the ability of doctors to provide the full spectrum of information to patients around seeking access to abortion care. And by putting a gag rule, it meant that in order for us to accept resources under what is called Title X, which is the nation's largest contraception, family planning, financial support that goes to organizations like Planned Parenthood to support patients with very low incomes. Limiting our ability of our doctors to provide meant that we were limited to the kind of access we could have from the federal government to support that care. So it matters, right, who is in this, because it impacts the kind of quality care that you can get in your community. It also matters with respect to abortion. We know, right, that 20 states have instituted these horrific bans and restrictions, and that Trump's abortion bans have impacted, patients with, that we now know the names of, folks like Amber Thurman and Candy Miller, two Black women who died in Georgia.
Right.
One who, self-managed her abortion at home because she was afraid of going to the hospital because she didn't want to be criminalized. Another one who went to the hospital because she was experiencing challenges, and the doctors still were unable to support her because they were afraid of being criminalized. And so I think that, when you think about the stakes of this election, like, our very bodies are on the ballot, right? Our very ability to get the care that we need when we need it is on the ballot. And we know that, and I say this is the head of the Action Fund, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House with a governing majority could help us not only invest in the kind of care that we need across the country as they have laid out in their various agendas, but also really help us restore reproductive freedom to where we should be by protecting it with federal legislation.
Absolutely. I definitely concur. And to the point of, I think, with Planned Parenthood's vast reach in the ways that you are fixing many issues that we have in our society. I'd love for you to address the healthcare disparities that you see in underserved communities, because particularly, as a young Black woman myself, I know firsthand, just based on my own experiences with medical racism and medical bias, Planned Parenthood, I know, can kind of bridge that gap and support people. So I'd love for you to chime in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we know the data, right? We've seen that we are we do exist in many ways at the margins of the healthcare system. We know that bias operates in ways that deny us kind of our own humanity inside of medical structures. So people don't see our pain in the same way. People don't see our advocacy in the same way. People don't see our, autonomy and our ability to care for ourselves in the same way. And that has been baked into, the medical system, right? It has been baked into the very history of gynecology, right? It was enslaved women's bodies that were tested on to, without anesthesia in order to understand the full spectrum of gynecology, hundreds of years ago. And so I think that knowing just in recent years, these same falsehoods about how our bodies operate, how our pain operates, still existed in medical books and textbooks and, residency programs and conversations. So I think we have to start, as always, when we talk about racism and we talk about the fact that racism is a public health crisis, we need to name it in the that it exists institutionally It exists, among very well-meaning people who want to, who signed up to care for people, but it exists because it is baked into those systems. And I think that, my goal at Planned Parenthood as the second Black woman in 100 plus years to lead the organization is to make Planned Parenthood the destination for Black women to get their care, right? And evidence-based that prove that we are the best place for us to get our care, and to consider, if we center the experience of, Black girls and gender expansive folks, what would it mean for us to redesign our work, redesign our centers, redesign our the kind of healthcare offerings in ways that are demonstrating to communities and to our community that we could be entrusted with the being able to provide the best support. That's our goal, and we've been working over the last few years with our affiliates to really understand what that undertaking would mean.
Oh, that is so beautiful to hear. It's funny. It kind of reminds me of, I'm a very big Grey's Anatomy fan, and this whole idea that Miranda Bailey put together this clinic to support kind of essentially what you're saying is like making sure that people who are in need are able to be seen and supported. And so I just love this, always like the crossover between, I think, like entertainment and politics, and like sometimes seeing it on TV is what motivates other people to come support your work. So shout out to Grey's Anatomy, shout out to Planned Parenthood Action Fund, and all the different ways that we kind of go. Yeah.
I was going to say, shout out to Shonda Rhimes. She's 100%. A Planned Parenthood board member, by the way, of the local affiliate and on the national board too. And, I think comes to the work, honestly, what they did after Dobbs, the series took on what the abortion crisis would look like, coming into emergency rooms and seeing all of the support of folks. And so I love that you tied that together, because that really is what it means. And I also loved that you use the language "be seen," right? Because it is not just being seen as in like the doctor will now see you, but it's also being seen like for we have to see our humanity, right, in order to treat us like people. And I think because we have been just dehumanized for so long and denied our humanity, I think that is, again, a function that has been baked into the medical system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of potential maybe solutions, I'd love for us to pivot into more Gen Z talk. So I'd love to know from you, how do you feel social media plays a role in the fight for reproductive freedom? I see it being talked about every day on my feed, but I know my algorithm is like catered towards me and my issues and the things that I care about. But from your vantage point, what does the landscape look like on the internet?
Ooh, the internets. Look, I think there is a lot of healthy conversation happening on the internet, and I think there are a lot of very knowledgeable people, including Planned Parenthood, content creators and folks who are providing very helpful, useful information about how to take care of our bodies, how to advocate for our bodies, how to understand the connection between care and rights and what we need to do to protect ourselves. And there is a lot of misinformation. I don't know about you, Ashley, but my doctor always hates when I say, I called Dr. Google and I think I have this,
Always. Good for a self-diagnosis, always.
Always good. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've got this, but not this. I think that always opens you up to not getting the right access to information that you might need. And so I think it's important, for Planned Parenthood, we are a trusted messenger. People kind of see the brand, they see the name, they know that we offer, Planned Parenthood affiliates offer kind of non-judgmental care, that we are pride ourselves in being experts in having kind of conversations around topics that have been stigmatized. And so when people see our information, they want to learn more because they know it is not the misinformation. And so that's where I think social media becomes really important. I also think social media is so important around storytelling, like the things that we've seen over the last few years of people just telling their stories, of just kind of explaining to people whether they lived in a period, pre-1973, pre-Roe, and they understood kind of the impact of what ban would look like to kind of the experiences they've had through Roe, and now, that we no longer have those protections. I think that sharing the information and the stories, I think, has been really important too.
Absolutely. I actually just filmed a video last week, which will come out possibly this week, about kind of reproductive freedom and what it looked like before pre-Roe, because I think like being a member of Gen Z, like I can't really fathom what life was like in the 70s beyond what I see on television. Like I wasn't there. So I think sometimes we're as a generation a little bit at a deficit when you're like, oh, like this is going to go back to times pre-Roe. Well, like what does pre-Roe look like? Like how problematic was it actually? Like people don't really kind of have the full scope, even to the point of us wanting to protect democracy. Like, oh, democracy is going to fall. Well, like if you don't have a framework for what democracy looks like when it's not active in your country, it's sometimes hard to kind of put those dots together. So I just think it's really important that we kind of have that framework. And I'm glad that social media is a place where we can start having those conversations too. 'Cause sometimes, not everyone's going to go read a book. Sometimes they'll watch a 30-second minute or 1-minute video. So trying to find people where they are, I think is so important.
I think that's right. And what I would add to that, so I'm somebody who grew up in the 70s. I happen to be almost as old as Roe, or actually, I guess I'm older than Roe. I was born in 1970. I was born 6 months before Roe. Woo, child. So like the very idea of, of growing up in Gen X as a beneficiary of all the fights beforehand, of a beneficiary of, civil rights and Black Power movements, as well as the feminist movement, the second wave feminist movement. Like I grew up in a world,
Right.
Our rights, were for all intents and purposes secured, right? But we would still have to work for them, right? And ensure that they were enacted fairly. But, our job, my generation's job was to go earn it, right? Was to go on and take advantage of those rights and to continue to pay that progress. Never did I think we would be in a world post civil rights, post, the feminist movement, to be able to say, these rights could be taken away. And so I do think it's something really interesting for Gen Z to think about right now, to understand that, rights are never settled. Movements are never settled. They have to be contested and recontested for every generation. They have to be made relevant for every generation, because what we just experienced 2 years ago was, yes, abortion rights being taken away, but really as a proxy for our freedoms are not guaranteed, right? They may be protected state by state.
Right.
They protected here and there, but they are not guaranteed. And so we have to ensure that we fight a long game to ensure that we are protected under our Constitution.
Absolutely. And to the point of kind of these overlapping groups in the time period in which everyone was kind of fighting for rights in a similar time, I feel like we're definitely in that space again. And so I'd just love for you to touch on the importance of building coalitions across different social movements, because, yeah, someone's group may not directly be fighting for the same thing that you're fighting for, but I have a feeling that we're all kind of in the same boat. Our freedoms are on the line. So what does that look like for you and your role, and then also specifically for the org at all?
Right. So Planned Parenthood patients don't, they may come to us for birth control. They may come to us for abortion, but they leave and they may be worried about their immigration status, right? They may be worried about, being stopped by the police for, driving while Black. They may be worried about kind of
Right.
their gender identity and how they are, being seen and supported in the world. And so I think understanding that the people who we are fighting for are living at multiple intersections is as a starting point, right? Intersectionality, the term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw,
Right.
who's a law professor.
Love us some Kimberly Crenshaw.
We though, she is the one who really understand that actually coalitions are insufficient. Coalitions are about bringing community, bringing groups together to fight for oftentimes for specific goals, specific elections, and then sometimes they come together to get something done, and then they dissipate. But what we really need to be doing is building infrastructure at the intersections, right? We have to actually create that infrastructure
Right.
intersectionality so that our movements move together. It's the same people who are fighting, the same people who are putting laws in place for banning abortion are the same people who are putting in voting rights limitations. They're the same people who are banning gender care. They're the same people who are banning books. They're the same people who are fighting against DEI. They're the same people, same people, same states. And so I think, our movements become much stronger together when we have an infrastructure of how we fight together and we sustain that infrastructure. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Ugh, I'm so glad you're at the helm of this. It makes me feel very, very secure in knowing that. I mean, I think because when as a member of Gen Z, like I have climate anxiety, I have all the anxieties. This election has like raised my anxieties in ways that like I just didn't see possible. But it's really, I think, nice to see people in leadership who really do care and really are invested in doing the good work. And I think sometimes we again are almost detach people like you from orgs because like we're just moving through the world like, oh, I hear the word Planned Parenthood, but like, no, there's a team in place. There are boards, there are infrastructures set up to try to support this work. So one, I thank you. I'll probably say it 5 more times in the call. Bear with me. I'm very grateful for Planned Parenthood. But kind of shifting a little bit again, as a member of Gen Z, I know that there was 41 million of us who were eligible to vote in this election. And I saw a recent NBC News poll that said, I think around 53% of us said that we were absolutely voting, which, I mean, obviously I would love for that number to be higher. But with that is like 23 million people who are like ready to vote in this election, which is a pretty staggering number. And so I'd love to know from you why you think the youth vote is so crucial in this upcoming election, particularly.
Well, I cut my organizing teeth on organizing young people, on organizing the youth vote in 2004. And I think it is, this is an election about, really what kind of future we will have. All elections are in some ways about the future, but this is really about the kind of the underpinning of what our future will look like, what kind of freedom we will have, what kind of access to democracy we will have, what kind of ability to tackle the big challenges that are before us, the big complex challenges that are before us. You named climate. That is obviously an existential threat for the globe. And what will it mean for us as we fight generations to come together to solve that? How will we do that together? I think about the fact that, with respect to democracy, there are more countries around the globe that are descending into authoritarianism, into dictatorships, than there are ascending into democracy. And so how are we going to protect the very important, long-term self-governing experiment that we have here in the US that has been so important for us to actually establish our rights and freedoms and fight for them? And so I think that action just hits different, right? It really is watching these things be on the line in a very tangible, upfront way. We know what the world has looked like under a Trump administration, and quite frankly, it was very scary, right? We started off with kind of the Muslim ban and communities, living in fear of being targeted and attacked. We've seen the outrage and the hate and towards Asian communities during COVID. We saw, the same person who took out full page ads against the Central Park Five, who are now the exonerated Five.
Yeah.
Because of his demonization of young Black men. We've seen the misogyny and, felony really of the sexual assault is propagated personally.
Yeah.
There's a culture of it that has really reinforced the all the way up to the misogyny that we're experiencing with the abortion bans. And so I think that, what I know about millennials is that they are the most diverse, kind of most powerful generation that really cares about tackling these issues. They're not single issue voters. They're ones that really focus on the big picture of freedom and how we can all live our best lives, right? As we've raised you all, we've said, go be your authentic self, right? We've said, go, find your way to be in a box. And I think it's important for millennials to come back to us and say, okay, this is the way we want to live our lives. And we are going to fight for the structures that are going to help us do that. And I think that kind of accountability that will come from, 53%, hopefully that is the low bar of,
I think it is the low bar. I have a feeling.
too. And I think that watching you all drive, millennials drove the ballot initiative votes that we've seen of the last few years. It was young people who were showing up because they were so angry about watching their rights being taken away. And I think it is the power that you all have, that you all really are in a powerful, kind of compelling, I think one of the largest generations right now, to really help us kind of set the course right in this country.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I was speaking to a friend the other day about this notion that like sometimes in particularly in Black families, I feel like you're always a child until you have a child. Like that seems to be the way that things work in terms of my mom is like, no, you're still a child. Like, I don't care that you're 25, you're a child. But like with that comes this notion of like also trying to figure out in the political sphere, like, yeah, but I also am an adult. So like how to navigate this like weird stage of life where people are like, no, you're still a baby, but like also vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. So like trying to find this balance, I think, is really interesting, and like being the new adults on the block. And I honestly would really love to see some studies like combining Gen Z and millennials, because like I guess an elder Gen Zer, they would say, but like I also grew up with VHSs, so I feel very millennial coded sometimes. But like this notion that like we are the new adults here, and like trying to assuage real change as a collective. Like I think that actually the coalition of Gen Z and millennials coming in together is hopefully what will turn history on its head in the right direction. So it's nice to hear when people, I think, see us as the voting bloc that we are, and treat us as such, and look at us like we are a part of the base, because we really are. We are adults, guys. So it's really nice to see that. And I guess I would just love to know from what were you saying? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, yes, you are. I mean, you have graduated into participating into society. That's how I look, like participating as full-fledged members of society. And I think it's also still important to remember, right? Because I think as Black folks, because of our ancestry, our experience, particularly here, it's important for us to also think about, I think about it in the kind of Native American tradition where, they think about their actions in relationship to 7 generations, right? Like wherever you are in the middle of the generation. There are 3 generations that came before you and 3 generations that will come for you. And you're responsible for all 7 generations. So the actions that you take, both to honor the work that has happened 3 generations before you, and also push forward and ensure that the decisions you're making are going to honor the future generations, I think has to be important. Like I know you hear this all the time, as I do, like we standing on the shoulders of our, of our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, who are legends, right? Who, whether they were leading significant organizations or doing the frontline work to ensure that our freedom was there. And I think that's the responsibility that undergird the power. And so we really want to keep that in mind as we make these very critical decisions. Like every vote is a decision towards a path towards somewhere. And we have to be active and hold that responsibility in very deep ways.
Absolutely. And speaking of that responsibility, I would just love to know from you what strategies you recommend in mobilizing young voters, and also helping them, I guess a 2-parter, helping them navigate like all the misinformation online. Because like I think the very unique thing about our generations coming up is that like we're combating deepfakes, we're combating AI, we're combating so many things and trying to like parse out what's real and what's not. And content creators now are becoming the mediators between like politicians and the general public, and like making sure that the content creator is actually espousing the right information too is a whole other thing. So just like, I guess twofold, how we should mobilize in general as a generation, and like what methods you think have been working that you've seen, and also any advice you can give us on how to navigate the interwebs as they are.
Yeah, I didn't come up with social media as an organizer, but I did come up understanding that it is the importance of networks. It is the importance of people that you know and trust. It is the importance of, your local institutions and your kind of local people that are the ones that always have your best interest in conversation. That could be, still your church. It could still be your community center. It could still be your school network. It could still be your Jack and Jill network. It could be so many different ways in which we get access to information just by peer to peer. And that is always the way that, if I say, Ashley, I need you to do this, it will be much different than someone kind of 5 people removed from you, who will
Yeah.
that decision. So I think that we just have to come back to first principles on organizing, because that has never failed us. I also think that, we have to help people parse out, to your point, that the deep misinformation, the deep fakes, all of the crazy things that people say. And what's been unfortunate over the last, decade plus has been the erosion of our belief in journalism, right? It is way in which facts and information get presented. There still are, even if we may not agree with them all the time, there still is such a noble role for the journalism industry, what you call the fourth estate, because it is the kind of fourth branch of government that really helps hold accountable. I think about the importance of the NNPA, right? The National Negro Paper Association, that the collection of local papers and local communities that have a lens that comes directly from our vantage point that, we still rely on to these days. My grandmother ran the Amsterdam News, and now I'm friends with the editor of the Amsterdam News. But I think it's always important for me to have a good snapshot of, kind of how they are reporting from our community. We cannot accept the kind of false equivalence that has kind of popped up in our world where, folks believe they have to present 2 sides of everything, even though that's not where the majority of people are. What we need are facts, right? We need are indisputable facts, and we've got to train our young people to be really critical, discerning thinkers, to not, you wouldn't believe all of the misinformation about your friend, right? When people are out there telling lies on them, we have to have that same standard for when people are using misinformation to characterize politicians or characterize policies, and do our own research, right, from trusted sources.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I find that even in my daughters, my daughters are 12 and 15, that one of the things that they're being taught right now is how to discern, sources, right? And so it's always like kind of, interesting to see how the education system is seeing this as a problem, and they're thinking through the skill sets that we are going to need to live and to drive kind of in fair democracy.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of funny to me. I was just thinking about like the time when they decided that we didn't need cursive in schools anymore, which was a very devastating time for me. I already knew how to write in cursive, but what it said to me more than anything, beyond just the like notion that, okay, that's not in school anymore, was that like I thought about with my mom, who's an academic, like archives are written in cursive. Like people, of course, now we know that those things can be digitized in a certain capacity, but like it felt like the beginning of the end to me of like what it means to like to support intellectualism in our country. Like you're telling a whole generation they don't need to read these historic documents. They don't need to understand this. And this was before there was really a method to digitize. So I was deeply concerned then. And I see even now, it's like you'll get information on social media, but without citations, how do I know that what you're saying is legitimate? And so like I always try to look to news sources, and like I follow really fun social media pages that talk about the news, but they always end with a list of their sources. And that's how I know, okay, if I need to go do additional research, they didn't just pull this idea out of thin air, but like to know at least that this is kind of being incorporated back into schools makes me very happy, and very hopeful for the coming generation, because like it is a big mountain to climb to make sure that you're getting the information that you need, especially when like sometimes the misinformation sounds really good. Sometimes it sounds very easy to just be like, oh, they said that in a very convincing way. That was great. I'm going to run with it. But like, maybe that's not the truth, guys. We got to look beyond Twitter. So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I think, yeah. So important. I guess speaking of young people again, what advice would you give to young people aspiring, not only to a career in politics and advocacy, but even to do work with your organization as well, or to be in your position one day? I know that's like a 4 or 5 point question, but just answer in the way that feels best to you.
Well, I mean, look, get involved, do something, right? I think is always the first step. It is to do your research, learn about kind of what different organizations do, what their approach is, right? And see what moves you, what issue really moves you. And I find that the work is hard. The work is challenging. And the thing that sustains you and carries you is your passion for it, right? Even when, you don't think you can do another day, it is kind of understanding how your passion to really solve something becomes really important. So I think that would be step one. I think step two is, to get involved in organizations and also take a look around and see and make sure that you understand the landscape. You understand kind of who are the decision makers, who are the thought leaders, who are the people who you want to learn from that are moving kind of work along. I think that is a really important skill set for young people growing into leadership, to really be able to discern where that movement is happening and to see how you can position yourself. Ask for 20 minutes for coffee, ask for a go-see, ask for a conversation. You'd be so surprised at how many people want to, just share their path or share their journey or share their kind of experience and lessons along the way, because that is really paying it forward in such important ways. And then the third thing I would say is to have a theory of change, right? I think that the ways in which I would say when I, invest time in people, when I invest time in growing leadership, it very often comes from the kind of leadership that I am seeing, right? The leadership potential that I'm seeing in young people, the ones who are coming with like an idea of like where they want to go and how they want to grow and what they think we could be doing better, and how and why. I think those are the important, challenging conversations that, and I'm a professor by trade, so like your mom, an academic. So I think there is something kind of natural about that in my relationship with folks, but I know that it really inspires leaders to kind of have that experience. And then the last thing is always do the work, right? I mean, you will never not get noticed if you are doing the work, right? And I think that's a differentiator. There's no path from, intern to president, without doing the work and putting it in. And I think that is something that we need to kind of really think about. What I love about Planned Parenthood is that in many ways, like the passion is so clear, the mission is so clear, and there are so many obstacles to delivering the mission that kind of being thrown into the fire, you're always getting like a baptism by fire, because there's always a threat, there's always like something happening, and it allows you to step in and start kind of learning very quickly to support the work in the organization. And I think we've trained some of the best leaders because they've had an experience that has allowed them to get very close in urgency and in mission at the same time. And I'm really proud of that as a organizational leader.
That's just so exciting. I this past weekend, I know that this won't come out tomorrow, so like this weekend to you guys won't mean anything, but I was at Spell House Homecoming actually with Planned Parenthood Votes, which is another part of the org. So like there's lots of different prongs. But it was really exciting to see, because I think oftentimes on the internet I hear like, okay, like our generation isn't really like, but people who are actually not in our generation will say they don't care about this, or they're not really concerned about this. And we got so many pledge cards signed of people saying that they were going to support reproductive freedom, that were members of Gen Z, that were millennials, who were like having the time of their lives at homecoming, but stopped to take a second to acknowledge this issue matters to me. So I just think it's so special, because the team I was with were just a group of people that I had met that day, but you can tell in all of the different facets of the organization that everyone really cares. And so I think that's from the top down, bottom up, just in terms of like being able to see that just made me very happy, and smile. So great vibes there.
That's so great. I heard it was
Yeah.
lit. I know. My sister's went as well.
Oh my goodness.
It was lit. Yes, indeed.
It was a time. It was honestly, I was shocked because I actually hadn't been back to homecoming since 2019, which was my senior year homecoming before the world shut down. So yes, I'm still salty, but that's what that is. But this was my 5-year reunion, and so I came back to campus and was like, there's a Sprite stage, there's a this, there's a that. Like, what is happening? When did we become this? Like, it was, you could hardly walk. There was so many people, and it was great vibes, but I was in shock. But to that point, what was really exciting to me more than anything was like, there was so many different ways to get involved politically in that space. Like they used the responsibility that they had to that demographic of people to make sure that we were continuing to mobilize, while everybody was having their drinks and their good times. So that was just, it was a very exciting time.
Party with a purpose, right?
Listen, party with a purpose. Love that. Well, actually now I'd love to pivot, and this probably will go at the beginning of the episode actually, but I wanted to pivot a little bit to giving people more of insight into your own background, because I think sometimes for me, like, I get really inspired hearing about someone's journey. I know it won't be my own, but it just kind of like sets you on the right path. And for those who aren't exactly familiar with you, I think this is a great time to just give them all the tea, and all the tea that you want to share. Correction. Well, so just to start, would you mind sharing your journey to how you became a leader in reproductive rights advocacy? Because I've done a little bit of research about your background, but like I'm sure it wasn't like just clear cut, I'm going to go be president of all these spaces.
Not at all. In fact, it's a lesson in, not getting ready, but staying ready, to be honest. I think that's like a important motto. Look, I was trained as an academic, political scientist, and I had been teaching at Yale and Wesleyan, and courses on the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement politics. Just understanding kind of, I think of the political science as the study of power, right? And so really kind of understanding how we move, how movements literally move people into action and into power building in ways that help them advance their identity, their who they want to be in the world. And I, was teaching one day, and I'd written an article about organizing the hip hop generation in the early 2000s, and it just came with a theory, right? When I say a theory of change is important to me, because it really was like saying, okay, we built a model around Black politics, or I've grown up under a model of Black politics that it existed for several generations, and there was something new happening, right? There was something like there was power building potential that was happening inside of the hip hop community. And what I researched and discovered was that the record industry had a model for turning people out, mobilizing people, turning them out every Tuesday to buy a record, and that involved. The reason the records would drop on a Tuesday is because Billboard ratings came out on a Wednesday. So it would give them the full range of a full week to do everything they can to mobilize, to get the street teams out, to do all the radio, to do the, ground campaign, to hit all the barbershops in order to get people that record to enter the charts at, 400 and rise to the top, right? That was like the gold standard. Yeah. The hit record. And so, I went to some industry heads and I was like, well, why can't you take this apparatus and turn people out on the first Tuesday of November? Hey, how about that? Right. And that allowed me to engage at a very high level of experimentation of what it would take to motivate folks, how people needed to be educated around, democracy and how it works, how we became educated around what it would mean to build our power. And that structure allowed me to kind of, take a step back from academia and become a practitioner and become a strategist. So I'd say like my kind of both my academic training as well as like my desire to get my hands dirty to really test on the ground kind of was the beginning of my journey. during the 2008 election, the primary season, Barack Obama gave a very powerful speech around mobilizing, really around the race in Philadelphia. And I, at the time, had been engaged with I've been doing a lot of the kind of influencer work to understand how to mobilize people. And I was also engaged in a lot of conversations with social psychologists around the nature of implicit bias that was kind of new to the public at the time. It's kind of been living in the academy, and worked with a number of researchers to develop a information around like how we could bring implicit bias more to the mainstream, because we knew that an Obama election under a theory of post-racialism would be very dangerous for the very racialized world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have like language and science to help people understand and make meaning that, no one person, no one Black president could actually address structural racism in the ways that he would be expected to. And so upon the election of President Obama, I created a think tank called the Perception Institute that brought together, some of our nation's foremost thinkers in the, what we call the mind sciences, so social psychology and kind of neurology and, neuroscience, to bring together, like, what do we really understand about how our brains and bodies experience race? And that really happened at the time of the killing of Trayvon Martin. And it was a moment when we had just really deep insight into how bias operates. And we were able to bring that into help make meaning of a public conversation around how bias operates, right? That not everything is kind of as explicit, that there are all these subtle ways in which kind of our systems get infected by implicit bias, and that that is one way to help us make meaning, but there are also diagnoses, right? There are also solutions to de-biasing, systems in order to affect. So that work led us to work with kind of police departments and healthcare systems and education systems, all places that, for the public good, de-biasing would help kind of yield a different outcome, and test it, and to do it kind of in a very more scientific way of kind of helping folks navigate that and build better policies around how to navigate and manage bias. That led me to do some corporate work, which was also very fascinating, right? It's these institutions, it lives everywhere. We started working with companies like Starbucks and Google and Goldman Sachs and places where, where understanding how access to capital, access to jobs, access to communities also was critically important. And at the same time, I was on the board of Planned Parenthood. I joined the board because I, kind of recognized that in all of the work I was doing, I didn't have any real feminist agenda, no organization that I was working with or womanist agenda that was centered around the experiences of women and women of color. And so I found myself on the board and, kind of really simultaneously built that perception at the same time I was part of the organization. And our former president, Cecile Richards, stepped down. And, some folk came to me at the time and they were like, you should put your name in for that job. And I was like, no, that's not me. I don't see myself as president of Planned Parenthood. But I'm going to support whoever takes that work on. And, I'm really happy in my lane here and what I created. And then the organization brought someone in. Person was not the right fit for the organization. And we ended up separating from that leader, and the board chair came to me and asked me if I would step in that moment. And, I detail all the various pieces of my career because it was a moment where I felt like I had been training in a lot of ways for a moment
Yeah.
to be able to support and lead the organization. I'd been training in this moment to support both, the organizing that needed to happen in 2019 going into 2020. I had been training as a student of helping an organization that is 100 years old grapple with its own racial reckoning. I have been training in this moment to really understand the impact of, the kind of overtaking of state houses and judges that kind of would move us into the moment around the Dobbs decision. I had been, a board member of Planned Parenthood, so I understood how the organization intimately worked. And, it was a moment where I felt like I could step in, as scared as I was, because none of these jobs are easy or, happy or, but,
Right.
but to be able to say, okay, how am I going to apply all of what I have learned and all of what I had, come to understand around the particular moment that we are in to step in and lead. And, I think the important things here for me were kind of feeling very confident about my own expertise, but also feeling really confident about the systems and structures I put around me, my kitchen cabinets, my big sisters, like the colored girls that I know well, like Mignon Moore and, Donna Brazil.
Yeah.
Yolanda Caraway, folks who could come, and be my thought partners and friends, and knowing that I was, I could lean back or I could fall back, but I would have hands on me to push me forward. And I can't tell you how much that served me over the last 5 years now. I didn't think I'd be leading a healthcare organization through an epidemic. I didn't think I'd be leading an organization through an actual racial reckoning. I didn't think I would be leading an organization through the overturning of one of our most fundamental rights. But I think staying centered on what the mission is, really enjoying fights. I like a fight and like being on the right side, and really believing in and supporting the incredible young talent that I have throughout the organization that, I feel like I'm paying forward the next 3 generations.
Yeah, I think that is so beautiful. I feel like that's a whole episode, but I want to keep going. But it just is, it's, it's just so beautiful, I think, because like, even like as a 25-year-old, like I'm doing 20 billion things at once and trying to figure out my way. And I know that many listeners are on the same path, and just like knowing that it all does end up somewhere, that your work, if you're on a path of staying true to yourself and your belief system, but also like staying ready and committing to doing that work, like you might end up in a position of real meaning and power and ability to change lives. So I think it's really special to just know that like where you are in your journey right now might be leading to something 5-10 years from now that you couldn't even fathom. But like, if you're doing the work now, it will pay off. So great vibes for all of the Gen Zers and millennials who are struggling, to know that it can get better. But I think really quick sidebar, when you were saying this, I don't know if you know, my mom is also a political scientist and created one of the first courses on hip hop in LA. She created a politics of hip hop course at Cal State Northridge in like, I want to say like 04, 05-ish. And so it was just funny hearing this, because I was like, oh my gosh, you guys would probably talk for 5 hours about that whole situation.
Totally. I'm sure we probably intersected at some of like the summits or the, 100%. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Very much so. So I come from, I think, an organizing background with my dad, of course, but with my mom, she created a hip hop think tank on campus with these students. And they all came together and they were like the first group to go to academic conferences and talk about hip hop, and like, cause they were a part of the hip hop generation. So I think for me growing up, seeing that level of like young people organizing on college campuses or young people organizing in like social movements, it's just like, it's beautiful to all see it come together, and also to see how it can inform different roles, right? Because like, you aren't specifically working in hip hop right now, but that information and that knowledge was a base for you. So I think it's really, really cool.
Hip hop, I'm Gen X, just like your daddy, but I am still hip hop and always will be. And I come back again to first principles, right? This is all about organizing from where you are, right? Meeting people where they are. For me, it was meeting people through hip hop. And for me, it was meeting people through, some of us still were in church on Sunday, but not everybody. So sometimes it meant institutions, right? It meant organizing in the club.
Yeah.
In the in the community. And so I do think that that is incredibly important, and each generation is going to do it differently, it's going to hit it differently, but the cause is the same, right? We are still out here fighting for freedom.
Absolutely. Well, I have like two more of my own questions, and then I actually have another member of Gen Z. I like to do this segment at the end where I let someone else lend their voice to the conversation. So I'm not the voice of Gen Z. So I have a question from her. But before that, I just wanted to ask you what your vision for the future of reproductive rights and freedom in healthcare is in America. If you could have it your way, McDonald's style, what would it look like?
I mean, I want people to be able to get access to care wherever they are and whenever they need it, right? It really needs to be, all here and now. There's an incredible clip, 2-minute clip from Dr. King, who talks about wanting to have all of our fundamental rights, wanting to have all of them, not just some of them, wanting to have all of them here, not just in Alabama, not just in New York and California and Illinois, but Alabama and Mississippi too, and to having them all now, right? It is about, being able to go to a trusted provider. It's being able to access affordable care. It is being able to have, destigmatize conversations around sexual and reproductive health care. And it is about centering the experiences of those people who have been the most harmed by the healthcare system, so that, we are building a new system and structure that takes care of everybody.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Okay, so we're going to ask this question.
Hi, Alexis. My name is Ashley. I'm 22 years old, and I'm an early graduate senior at Oglethorpe University. My question is, how is Planned Parenthood navigating their reproductive healthcare across the nation and the legislation that is making it harder for people to receive reproductive healthcare? And what can young people do to help your org's efforts? Thank you.
Okay, I love that question. Look, this is how I describe Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood provides for you and we ride for you. And I think that the riding part is about understanding that healthcare is political. It has been politicized. It is not something it's something that should not be political at all, because we all need access to good, affordable healthcare. But because it has been so politicized across this country, it means we have to fight for it. So if young people want to be involved, it means they can sign up on their college campuses, on our Generation Action chapters, or come to us to get started in building one. It means that they can sign up with our local affiliates and their political and advocacy organizations to be a part of the army of supporters, folks who are going to take action, who are going to make calls, who are going to knock on doors, who are going to text their friends, who are going to show up at Capitol, the Capitol building when people are trying to pass harmful legislation, and give testimony and saying, no, not on my watch. It is about being an engaged citizen and ensuring that you are fighting for that every single day. Anything anyone can do in terms of their time, their talent, their treasure to be a part of a movement for fighting for care, that's where we would love your engagement.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I thank you so much for your time, Alexis. This was absolutely wonderful. I could talk to you for another 5 hours about all the things, but we just thank you so much for coming on Push the Next Generation. Such a good vibe. If you want to submit a question to our guests, DM at Push the Next Generation Pod for a chance to make it onto future episodes. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Push the Next Generation, recommend it to a friend, follow on socials at Push the Next Generation Pod, and thank you so much for watching and listening. See you next week on Push Next Generation. In the meantime, let's all inhale and exhale. This is Ashley Jackson signing off.